They told me a man's worth is measured by what he gives to his family. I gave everything: money, time, pride. And then, one cold November night, they shut the door in my face. Not just on me, on every sacrifice I ever made. I stood there, fists clenched, staring at the home my hands had kept standing, hearing their laughter through glass I paid for. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't going to end quietly. You're not ready for what happened next. Before we go on, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from in the comments below. Lucas Bennett never thought betrayal could sound so casual. It came on a Wednesday afternoon, wrapped in the warmth of a latte and the gleam of a designer kitchen. He had driven across town, through streets lined with crisp autumn leaves, to see his daughter, Claire. He hadn't called first. He didn't need to. He'd been showing up for years, with groceries when her pantry was empty, with checks when the mortgage was due, with tools when Ethan decided home repairs were too much of a hassle. He wasn't there to ask for anything. He was there to give, like always. Claire was perched on a bar stool at her marble island, flipping through a glossy magazine, the smell of pumpkin spice drifting from a candle that probably cost more than Lucas's weekly grocery bill. The house was immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported hardwood floors, the pool he'd financed last summer visible through the glass. He felt that familiar flicker of pride, the quiet satisfaction of knowing his hands had helped build this life. He broke the silence first. "Thought I'd bring my pecan pie for Thanksgiving. Your mom's recipe. Haven't made it since she passed." His voice softened at the memory of Caroline's laughter in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour. Claire didn't look up. "Dad, maybe it's better if you don't come this year." At first, the words didn't register. "Better if I don't what?" She set the magazine down, folding her hands neatly like she was about to deliver quarterly results. "Ethan's family will be here. They're more traditional. We want the evening to have a certain feel. It might be easier without you. Easier." The word snapped something in him. His eyes traveled the room, cataloging the silent testimony of his sacrifice. The dining set he'd bought after Claire complained their old one wasn't entertaining standard. The state-of-the-art appliances he'd paid for when she decided stainless steel was dated. The very roof he'd helped replace when Ethan miscalculated their budget. He kept his tone even. "What feel is that, exactly?" Claire hesitated. "You know how Ethan's parents are. They prefer conversations about travel, art, politics. They're not big on construction stories or small-town cooking." Lucas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean the stories about how I built my company from nothing? Or the food that kept you alive through college?" She shifted uncomfortably. "This isn't personal. It's just image. Mom understood her place. You should too." The sentence landed like a fist. Caroline, who'd stood beside him through every hard year, reduced to someone who understood her place. And now Claire, his own daughter, was telling him his place was somewhere outside her table. He could have argued. He could have begged for some sliver of space in a holiday he'd once anchored. But standing there, in the glow of the recessed lighting he'd paid for, Lucas saw something clearly. This wasn't about a meal. This was about erasing him from the picture she wanted to present. Ethan's voice broke the silence. He had appeared in the doorway, cufflinks glinting. "It's not personal, Lucas. My parents, they like a certain atmosphere. You understand?" "I do," Lucas said, and for the first time, he meant it. He understood exactly what they were telling him. He was good enough to fund the life, but not good enough to be in it. He stepped toward the door. Tell Ethan's parents. Happy holidays from me." Claire's voice followed him, tinged with irritation. "Dad, don't be like that." But the door closed behind him before she could finish. Outside, the late November air was sharp, cutting through his jacket, waking up every nerve. He walked to his truck, the crunch of leaves under his boots loud in the quiet suburban street. The engine roared to life, and for a moment, he just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the house he'd poured hundreds of thousands into. Memories flashed. Claire's first Christmas in that house, the time he fixed their furnace in the dead of winter, the afternoons he'd watched his grandkids in that backyard so she could get some rest. Every scene carried the same truth. He'd been there. Always. Now, suddenly, he wasn't welcome. He pulled away from the curb slowly, the house shrinking in his rearview mirror. But with every turn, the anger began to build, hot and focused. This wasn't going to be one of those wounds he swallowed and lived with. This was different. Halfway home, he passed a row of houses glowing with early holiday lights. In one window, a family sat at a long table, laughing. The father leaned back in his chair, a little girl on his lap, his hand ruffling her hair. Lucas remembered that feeling, the weight of a child who still thought you hung the moon. By the time he reached his driveway, the anger had crystallized into something harder. The betrayal was clear. The insult was sharp. But beneath it all was a realization that felt almost like clarity. He had spent years financing a life that had no room for him. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his chest, that things were about to change. Not just for Thanksgiving, not just for the holidays, for good. The drive home was long enough for the anger to settle, but short enough for the memories to start punching their way in. They came in no particular order, like some cruel highlight reel of my own stupidity. 7 years. That's how long I had been paying Claire and Ethan's mortgage. $3,100 every single month, without fail. That's 262 payments, if you counted the months I threw in extra to cover late fees. And I always counted. It hadn't started as a trap. The first year, Ethan's job in commercial real estate had hit a slow patch, or so they'd said. "Just until we get back on our feet," Claire promised. I didn't blink. I wanted them to keep their house, to raise my grandkids without worrying about uprooting them from their school. That first year, I wrote the checks with something like pride. The second year, they asked for help with repairs. The furnace had died in January. I wrote a $7,500 check before the pipes could freeze. I skipped replacing the cracked windshield on my own truck because family comes first. The third year, Ethan wanted to redo the backyard. Landscaping, stone patio, an outdoor kitchen. "It'll add value to the house," he said, as if that mattered to me. I paid the contractor in full, watching Ethan post the results on Instagram with captions like, "Dran's blessed life." Not one word about who'd funded the blessing. By the fourth year, I stopped telling anyone about the money. My sister asked why I hadn't taken that fishing trip to Alaska I'd been planning for a decade. I lied and said I was too busy with work. The truth was, Ethan had forgotten to renew their homeowner's insurance, and the renewal fee landed on me. The fifth year was the year I sold my '68 Mustang. It was the only car I'd ever rebuilt with my own hands, from the frame up, weekends in the garage with Caroline bringing me coffee. But my grandson had an emergency surgery, and when I asked about their insurance coverage, Claire said, "We're between plans right now." So I sold the Mustang in 3 days, handed over the cash, and told myself it was worth it to keep a child healthy. The sixth year, Ethan's career supposedly picked up. They stopped asking for help and started assuming it. There was no request for the mortgage money anymore, no embarrassed tone. The money just vanished from my account every month, like a bill I had no choice but to pay. Meanwhile, Claire's Instagram bloomed with champagne brunches, spa retreats, and a brand new Audi SUV she captioned with "Hard work pays off." I wondered whose hard work she meant. And then came the 7th year. I was eating canned soup 3 nights a week, telling myself it was healthier than takeout, while they installed a home theater system. I saw the delivery truck myself one afternoon, a week after Ethan forgot to pay the property taxes, and I covered it to avoid penalties. As I drove, I could see each sacrifice like a mile marker. The leather jacket I'd never bought because their kids needed private school uniforms. The cracked concrete on my own driveway I couldn't afford to fix because they needed a second bathroom remodel. The vacations I'd cut short. The birthdays I'd skipped celebrating for myself. The hobbies I'd abandoned because my money was already spent before it ever hit my hands. It was a slow bleed, and I'd let them open the vein. When the phone rang, I knew the number before I looked. Claire. I answered anyway. "Dad, I don't want you to think Thanksgiving is personal," she began, her tone the same one she'd used when explaining to waiters why the wine wasn't quite right. "Ethan's parents, they prefer a certain kind of conversation. Travel, art, politics. They're not really into stories about pouring concrete or fixing roofs," I cut in. "It's just image. You understand? Mom understood her place. You should too." That was the moment. Not the Thanksgiving snub, not even the years of being treated like a private ATM. It was that line, that insult to Caroline, the woman who had been my partner in every sense. Her place had been beside me, building a life we were proud of. And now my daughter was using it as code for "know when you're not good enough for the company we keep." Something in me locked into place. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't list the dollar amounts, the sacrifices, the miles driven to fix their problems. I just said, "I understand perfectly." And I did. I understood that I had been financing a performance. I wasn't family to them anymore. I was a prop, a background investor whose presence was unnecessary once the curtain went up. When the call ended, I didn't pace or stew. I walked straight to my desk, opened the drawer where I kept my financial files, and pulled out the folder marked Transfers. 7 years of bank statements stared back at me, each one a neat little receipt for my own humiliation. I ran my finger down the list, $3,100, $3,100, $3,100, until the numbers blurred. In that moment, the decision was made. There would be no more. No more automatic withdrawals. No more "just until we get back on our feet." No more pretending I was helping them stand, when all I'd been doing was making sure they never had to. The bleed was going to stop. And when it did, I knew there'd be noise, anger, accusations, maybe even the kind of public consequences Richard liked to threaten. But I'd learned something over 7 long years. You can't shame a man who's already been stripped of his dignity. You can only give him the chance to take it back. And I was ready to take back everything they thought I'd keep giving forever. At 9:02 the next morning, I stood inside First Horizon Bank, the same bank where I'd signed away years of my life to keep Claire and Ethan in a house they couldn't afford without me. The place smelled faintly of lemon polish and money that didn't belong to me. I stepped up to the counter, slid my ID across, and spoke before I could talk myself out of it. "I need to cancel an automatic transfer," I said. $3,100 monthly. The teller, young, polished, efficient, tapped on her keyboard without looking up. "And when would you like that to stop, Mr. Bennett?" "Immediately." A few keystrokes later, she looked up and smiled the way you do at a customer buying something trivial, like stamps. Done! Is there anything else I can help you with? There was. I could have asked her if she had any advice for explaining to your only daughter that you're done paying for her life. But instead, I said, no, that's everything. When I walked out of the bank, the air felt different. Thinner, sharper, alive. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't financially chained to people who thought I was furniture they could store in the garage until they needed it. That night, I celebrated with a ribeye steak cooked exactly the way I like it, and a glass of Cabernet that didn't come from the bargain bin. The meat was tender, the wine smooth, and the taste of my own money on my own table was better than anything I'd eaten in years. The high lasted until the phone rang the next morning. Claire's voice came through like a memo from a boss I'd never agreed to work for. Dad, can you do us a favor? Ethan's parents are flying in from Boston today. Their flight lands at 2. Can you pick them up? I let that sit for a beat. Of course, I said. My tone was even, almost warm. Thanks. Oh, and could you wear something nice? They notice that kind of thing. I hung up, without committing to anything else. At 2 o'clock sharp, I was in my garage, sanding the edge of a walnut coffee table I'd been building for months. I had a fresh cup of coffee within reach, music low in the background. The thought of them stepping off the plane, scanning the crowd for me, finding nothing. It was almost as satisfying as the smooth line of wood under my fingertips. By 5 o'clock, I pictured them still at the curb, the Massachusetts chill in their voices as they tried to get a cab during rush hour. By 7, there was a pounding at my door, loud enough to make the frame shudder. When I opened it, Richard was there first, red-faced and breathing hard like he'd just run up a hill. Catherine stood beside him, lips tight, eyes sharp. Claire lingered behind them, her heels clicking against the porch, as if even her anger had rhythm. "You humiliated us!" Catherine's voice cracked, not from sadness, but from the strain of keeping it steady. Richard leaned in, his breath hot and sour. "You have no idea who you're messing with, Bennett. I have connections. Business connections. Social connections. You think this little stunt won't have consequences?" I stepped back just enough to make them choose between crossing the threshold uninvited or backing down. "Get off my porch." Claire tried to wedge herself into the space between us. "Dad, you can't just leave them stranded like that. It's—" I cut her off. "Exactly what I can do." Richard's jaw clenched so tight, I thought I heard a tooth crack. "You'll regret this. Publicly." That word, publicly, landed in my gut like a warning and an invitation. I'd known from the moment I canceled the transfers that they wouldn't just take it quietly. They'd spin it, rewrite it, paint me as the problem. And they'd do it in a way that made them look like the victims. The old me might have tried to negotiate, to patch it over for the sake of keeping peace in a war I wasn't even winning. But I wasn't the old me anymore. "Leave," I said again, and this time they did, though Richard made sure to throw one last look over his shoulder, the kind of look a man gives when he's promising to burn you down. When the door shut behind them, I didn't feel the adrenaline let up. I felt it shift, honing itself into something sharper. They thought they were the only ones who could play that game. They thought they could take this into the public arena, and I'd crumble under the weight of gossip, lies, and headlines. I stood in my quiet living room, the sound of their car pulling away, fading into the night, and I realized something that almost made me laugh. They had just given me permission to stop playing defense. If they wanted a public fight, they were going to get one. But it wouldn't be the kind they expected. The Maplewood Chronicle landed on my doorstep like it was delivering breakfast, not a gut punch. I didn't even have to open it to feel the trap. Richard's fingerprints were all over the damn thing. Page 3. Local man abandons elderly couple. during airport storm. Storm? That Tuesday had been 60 degrees and cloudless. But the photo they chose, Richard and Catherine in heavy coats, standing at the arrivals curb with luggage stacked like they'd been stranded in Siberia, was pure theater. The text painted me as erratic, volatile, and emotionally unreliable, all while positioning them as frail, patient victims who'd suffered my neglect. Not a single line about 7 years of mortgage payments. No mention of who'd actually kept their roof over their heads. It was a hit job, clean and deliberate. I didn't need to guess how it got there. Richard's social circle was a Rolodex of favors owed. Editors, reporters, club presidents who owed him a handshake or a golf game. I read it twice, slowly, feeling the heat in my chest sharpen into something colder. It wasn't just a smear. It was the opening salvo in a public war. And that was their mistake. The old me might have called Claire, tried to patch it up, begged her to tell the truth. But after 7 years, I knew better. They weren't after reconciliation. They wanted narrative control. They wanted to turn me into the kind of man people whispered about in checkout lines. I wasn't going to let that stand. I started with the obvious. My own records. 7 years of bank transfers, all to the same account. $3,100 every month. Neat as clockwork. Utility payments in the hundreds. Furnace repair at $7,500. Backyard renovation at $12,000. Property taxes I'd covered at $4,200. Page after page of proof. But raw numbers are easy to ignore. People respond to pictures. So I opened Instagram. There was Claire, poolside in Cabo, champagne in hand, posted the same week she'd told me they were barely scraping by. Ethan, grinning in front of a new Audi 2 days after I'd paid their overdue electric bill. Claire in a designer coat at a winter market in Vienna while their property taxes sat unpaid. I saved every screenshot, each one labeled with the matching bank statement. Still, I needed a hammer blow. That's when I called Tom Grady. Tom and I went back to our days in the trades, me building homes, him patrolling the streets. Now he was a private investigator, semi-retired, but still sharp as a razor. I told him I needed everything on Richard Jenkins. He didn't ask why. 3 days later, he handed me a manila envelope thick enough to choke a paper shredder. Inside, unpaid property taxes on Richard's lake house, maxed out credit at a St. Bart's resort, and best of all, financial records showing that during his tenure as treasurer for the Maplewood Children's Fund, he'd redirected at least $18,000 into operational expenses that looked suspiciously like golf club dues and a week in Florida. It was more than I needed. It was dynamite. The question was where to light the fuse. Leaking it to the Chronicle would be suicide. Richard's reach there was too deep. Social media? Too easy for them to spin as fake or taken out of context. No, this had to happen in a place they couldn't mute me, in front of people whose opinions actually mattered to them. That's when the invitation arrived. A thick, embossed card in an equally pretentious envelope. Winter Lights Charity Gala. Hosted by Claire and Ethan Bennett. The event promised an evening of elegance in their home to benefit the very charity Richard had been bleeding dry. It was perfect. I bought a ticket, the most expensive tier. Then I went to a print shop and ordered 30 bound packets. Each contained my bank statements, the Instagram posts, and Tom Grady's PI report. The cover read, "For your eyes only. The truth about the Bennetts and the Jenkins." I stacked them neatly in my office. Heavy. Ready. Waiting. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't on defense. And in the quiet of my living room, looking at those packets, I realized something. They had chosen the battlefield, but I was going to choose the terms. And when I walked into that gala, I wasn't just going to tell the truth. I was going to detonate it. The Bennett's house glittered like a jewelry case when I arrived. Ice blue uplights washing the facade, valets in black vests jogging to catch keys tossed from German hoods. Inside, a string quartet sawed through a polished arrangement of pop hits, and a florist's worth of winter roses perfumed the air so thick you could taste it. Claire moved across the marble like a red comet, gown knifing the light, cheek kisses flaring in her wake. Ethan shadowed her in that tailored tux, a smile curated down to the millimeter. They were the picture they had paid to be. I didn't look like an interruption. I looked like a donor in a black suit and shined shoes, a man carrying a leather satchel that could have held a checkbook. That was the point. The auctioneer had a voice made of lacquer. One last lot before dinner. Our private chef experience for 10. A night you'll never forget. Paddles popped, the bids stacking higher, the room leaning forward with the practiced hunger of people who always get the last slice. Before anyone here spends another $1, I said, level, clear, you should know whose money has been paying for this evening and for the lifestyle you've all been admiring. The quartet tripped into silence. A server froze mid-step. 30 heads turned in a slow, perfect arc. Claire's smile cracked. Ethan's hand found her elbow and squeezed. Richard didn't move at all, just calculated. I started at the corner table and set the first packet down. For your eyes only. The truth about the Bennetts and the Jenkins. People reached because that's what people do around something they're told not to touch. Pages flipped. Brows knotted. The sound in the room changed, a frequency shift you feel in your teeth. A woman in winter pearls, Nancy Ellison, hospital foundation chair, read faster than the rest. Is this what it looks like? She said to no one, and to everyone. 7 years of transfers? All from you? She looked up, not blinking. All documented, I said. Mortgage, utilities, repairs. Their caption said, hard work pays off. It was mine. A man in a navy suit stabbed a finger at a page. These dates match the posts, Cabo, Vienna, the Audi. His tablemate, a councilman I'd once repaired a porch for, slid the binder to himself. Richard, he said without looking up, is that your signature on the Maplewood Children's Fund disbursement? Richard stepped forward, palms out, voice coated in credibility. We are not doing this circus. Those are misinterpretations of complex. Complex, Nancy repeated, eyes on the line item that read like a confession. Operational expenses, $6,400, Willow Ridge Golf Club. You billed charity money to a golf club. Catherine found her theater voice. This is a family ambush. Lucas is unwell. He left Richard and me in an actual storm. It was 60 degrees and sunny, I said, and a chuckle escaped someone who knew it, the first crack in the facade. Security appeared at the edge of the room, 2 men hired to move problems out of sight. They came toward me in careful choreography. Before they could touch my arm, a violinist, 20-something, brown hair looped in a knot, lifted her phone and said, "Just so you know, this is live to about 400 people." The security men stopped as if they'd reached a cliff. Claire found a new tack. She took 1 step alone, leaving Ethan's grip, eyes glassy but focused on craft. "Dad," she said, softer than I'd heard in years, "please, not like this. We can talk. In the study." The room wanted that version. A softer door closing on conflict, the assurance that nice people fix things in private. But I had brought evidence for a reason. They had chosen spectacle when they put my name in the chronicle. I didn't raise my voice. I widened my circle. "This is exactly like this," I said to the guests, not to Claire. You pledged money tonight believing you were supporting children in this town. The treasurer redirected funds to his luxuries. While you applauded this couple's generosity, I was paying their bills. You deserve the truth before you give again." The councilman closed his packet and finally looked at Richard. "You'll resign from the fund by morning," he said. "Not a request, a scheduling note." Ethan tried a smirk that didn't fit. "This is jealousy in a tux. He's been unstable for months. Ask Laura Perkins." "Laura's here," someone said, and 40 eyes snapped to the far wall where the Chronicle reporter stood half hidden behind a pillar. A notebook already open, a pen scratching like a match. She hadn't expected this, but she wasn't leaving. Richard pivoted again, hands slicing the air. "You think this makes you a hero, Bennett? You look small, bitter. A man who can't accept his daughter married up." "Married into debt," Nancy said, each syllable neat as cut glass. "And into theft." A back table erupted, the golfers. One of them had the good sense to be disgusted. "My firm matched 10,000 last quarter," he said, staring at Richard. "You told me it went to after-school programs." "It did," Richard snapped. "Operational." "You bought a Florida week during operational," the councilman said, tapping the page. The room's temperature dropped. Not the climate control, the social warmth. Chairs angled away from the hosts in tiny insults that add up. Catherine's practiced pity face slid into something raw and frightened. Ethan's jaw jutted with the stubbornness of a man who thinks denial is a door. Claire stood there, clutching herself. The red fabric turned darker under the chandelier. I hadn't come to savor it. I'd come to end it. I could feel the moment cresting. The exact second when a story stops belonging to the people who wrote it and starts belonging to the crowd that will carry it. I gathered whatever compassion I had left and turned it into clarity. "I'm not here for apologies," I said. "I don't want your money back. Keep the furniture, keep the cars, keep the story if it helps you sleep. What I won't keep is your lie about who paid for your shine. That ends tonight." A server set his tray down so he could clap. One, then two, then a skittering of hands like rain finding a roofline. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it wasn't nothing. Ethan tried to speak again, but words were a currency that had just been devalued. "Turn the music back on," Catherine whispered to no one, then louder, to the quartet. "Play." No one lifted a bow. I buttoned my jacket. "Enjoy your evening," I said, and meant it without malice. "Spend generously. On the kids." When I pushed through the double doors, winter rushed in like truth. The valets were juggling a new chaos, early departures, tight smiles, keys slapped into palms. Behind me, the auctioneer's microphone cracked alive, then died. Then a woman's voice rose, clear as a bell. "Board meeting. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Inside their bright house, social gravity was reversing, donors sliding away from a center that had burned too hot and soured. I didn't need to see the rest. I had moved the fulcrum. The night would do the lifting. On the porch, I paused under the icicle lights Claire had once asked me to help hang. My breath fogged, then cleared. Across the street, a neighbor's kids pressed their faces to a window to watch the parade of gowns and fury. They would grow up with a story about the night the Bennett's party broke in half. Maybe that would help them recognize the shape of a lie sooner. I walked to my truck. The engine came alive on the first turn, like it had been waiting for this one clean exit. I checked my mirrors once, not for regret, but for witnesses, and pulled into the river of red taillights, leaving a house that no longer belonged to a fantasy I'd paid for. It belonged to the truth now, and the truth had teeth. The week after the gala, Maplewood learned a new quiet. It wasn't the hush of politeness. It was the silence people use when they're rearranging their opinions. The Chronicle printed a measured piece by Laura Perkins, names withheld, allegations under review, a paragraph on the ethics of giving. Then a follow-up with names not withheld at all. The Children's Fund posted a statement at dawn, a full audit, Richard's resignation, a temporary pause on outgoing grants. The board scheduled a special meeting. The golf club deleted 3 months of photos. None of that brought satisfaction. Relief, maybe. The kind that lets you sleep through the night without your jaw clenched. I woke up 3 mornings in a row before my alarm and realized my body had gotten used to bracing for a call that never came. Emergency. Favor. Just this once. The calls did come, but I didn't answer them. You can choose where your attention lives. I built. With my hands. With my hours. I finished the walnut table for my sister's lake cabin and delivered it in a rented van with a thermos of coffee and old Springsteen on the radio. I repaired my own cracked driveway, 1 bag of mix at a time, each trowel stroke a small refusal to neglect myself. I signed up to teach a Saturday morning woodworking class at the community center because a dozen teenagers had more energy than sense and wanted to learn how to make something that would outlast a phone battery. On the 97th day after the gala, Claire knocked on my door. She didn't look ruined. She looked human. Ponytail? No heels. A coat that had seen weather. She came in when I stepped aside and stood in the doorway between my kitchen and living room like a person who recognizes the lines of a place for the first time. "You painted," she said, which was a way of saying, "You're building things without me." "I did," I said, which was a way of saying, "I can." She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She sat, hands braided in her lap, and spoke like someone who had memorized a script and then thrown it away on the drive over. "Dad, I'm sorry. For the paper. For the gala. For making you a wallet with feet. I let people decide where you fit in my life because it was easier than telling the truth. I liked the shine. It distracted me from what was missing in me." I poured coffee. 2 mugs. She took hers in both hands. Her fingers were bare. I noticed and didn't comment. "We're selling the house," she said. "We have to. Ethan and I are figuring out what we are without the stage." A breath. "The kids miss you." There they were. The 2 words with more gravity than the rest of the sentence. I didn't smile. I didn't punish. I set the rules because love without boundaries is just permission to repeat the past. "I forgave you already," I said. "But I'm not stepping back into the old arrangement. If we rebuild, we start at respect and work each beam from there." I said it plain. No more hiding me because I don't fit an image. No more emergencies that are just bad planning. And when you introduce me to people, you use the word father like it means something. "It does," she said, voice steadying. "It always did. I forgot to act like it." We started small, because small is sturdy. I met her at the diner on Oak for breakfast. No holidays, no audience, just pancakes and the sound of dishes and all the words that get said when you know you aren't auditioning anymore. A week later, I sat on a bleacher at my grandson's basketball game and clapped when he missed because he tried hard from the half-court line and grinned like a kid who knew he didn't have to perform to be welcome. Ethan didn't come to the game. I didn't ask why. Some absences are choices, and some are consequences. It wasn't mine to sort. When he did call, 3 weeks after the house went on the market, his voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. He didn't ask for money. He asked how to budget, how to start again without shortcuts. I gave him an hour. Boundaries don't require cruelty. They require clarity. Richard tried twice to reach me. The first was a voicemail made of legal phrasing and bruised pride. The second was quiet, almost a whisper. I went too far. I deleted them both. That forgiveness belonged to another ledger. Spring leaned into summer. I took the class outside at the community center and let the kids plane cedar boards under the sun, the shavings curling like confetti. I joined a Saturday morning hiking group that met at the trailhead behind the high school, people my age with knees that clicked, and stories that didn't require anyone to pretend. I bought 2 tickets to a small theater production because a friend from the center was in the chorus. The seat next to me stayed open for a while. One night, I took my sister. Another night, I took myself. That's allowed. That's victory. Claire came by one Sunday with a tin of store-bought cookies and an apology for not baking. We ate them on the porch and laughed about how her mother had burned the first pie she ever tried, and cried like the world had ended. "She would have loved this version of you," Claire said, looking out at the street. "The one who says no and means it." "She loved the other version too," I said, "but she warned me when I was turning into a ghost." We were quiet with that truth. It didn't wound, it warmed. We didn't fix 7 years in 7 weeks. We built something that didn't wobble when you leaned on it. I told Claire the next Thanksgiving could be a backyard grill, paper plates, mismatched chairs, no performance. She said yes fast, then slower, then better. I want that. On a soft June evening, I sat alone on the steps after a class, listening to the hum of a town that had learned new manners. The fund had a new treasurer, an audit committee, a line item posted for all to see. Nancy waved when she drove by. The Chronicle ran a piece about small donors being the backbone of big change. The golf club returned a check with an apology that was also a brand strategy. Fine. Everyone gets to do penance in their own language. I poured a measure of the good whiskey at home and set it next to a photo of Caroline in a sun hat, her smile on the edge of laughter. The porch light I finally fixed threw a clean circle across the boards. That light used to flicker when I was starving it. Now it held steady. That's how you know a house is honest. You fix the small lies. I thought about the table at my sister's cabin, the dings it had already collected from elbows, board games, careless joy. I thought about my grandson's missed shot, and my granddaughter's drawing of a truck with gray hair. I thought about the word father said without calculation. Family, I decided, not for the first time, not for the last, is not the people who stand nearest the camera. It's the ones who stand when the flash is gone. It's who shows up without an invoice. It's who learns and unlearns and tries again with their hands open. I raised the glass to the evening, to the past that had taught me how to measure, to the future that required better math. I wasn't rebuilding a life to hand it away. I was building it to live in. Here's to never paying for a seat at a table that asks you to be invisible. Here's to setting your own table, with room for anyone willing to sit without pretending. And here's to the clean, quiet joy of a porch light that no longer flickers. Because in the end, it's not about the house you kept standing, the bills you paid, or the sacrifices no one saw. It's about knowing you stood for something bigger. Respect, honor, the quiet kind of justice that doesn't ask for applause. It's about finding the courage to say, enough, and meaning it, even when it hurts. And maybe, if you're lucky, it's about discovering that the life you build for yourself is the one that lasts. If my story made you pause, think, or see yourself in any way, subscribe, like, and share this channel. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that it's okay to stand up, walk away, and never apologize for protecting your dignity.